The next two topics are subject-verb agreement and mixed construction. These are similar topics. Subject-verb agreement means that the subject and the verb within our sentence must agree in terms of number and person. When we talk about number, we're talking about whether the subject and verb are both singular or plural. And when we're talking about person, we're talking first, second, or third person. And you may recall that the first person is I or we, second person is you, whether it's singular or plural, and the third person means you're talking about somebody else either by a proper noun, a name, or a pronoun. So the scientist, he, she, they, it, Jane Doe, this person, that person, these are all in the third person. Now, the first and easiest rule to remember is that with most verbs in the present tense, there will be an S either on the verb or the noun. So we have the sentence here, the chemist titrates 100 milliliters, or the chemists titrate 100 milliliters. These are both correct. Where we run into challenges are when we get into more complicated sentences. And one of those examples is when we have a subject and then some other clause or some description in between and then the predicate at the end. And the reason this can become a challenge is because it might sound like the verb at the very end should agree in number or person with what's in the middle, when in fact it should actually agree with the subject at the start of the sentence. So an easy way to get around this one is generally to cover up everything that's in between and write a shorter sentence and then put the text back in. So in the top sentence, the chemist, along with a large group of students, titrate 100 milliliters. This sounds like the titrate should apply to the students, but in fact, the word titrate is the verb that applies to the subject chemist. And so you can see the corrected version below. And if you were to shorten that, it would just say the chemist titrates 100 milliliters. And then you can add in along with the large group of students. And again, showing the opposite, the chemist's titrates has been corrected to the chemist's titrate with the text in between. So the rule here is just to check for one S if you're dealing with the present tense. Another rule is to ignore the dependent clause at least while you're matching your noun to your verb. And then you can add that dependent clause back in. Another challenge comes up with subjects connected by the word and. Now, this is called a compound subject, and now the subject refers to everything that is separated by the and. So in this example, the student and her partner, that is now a compound subject. Neither one of these are the subject on their own. And so the compound subject should be plural. It should read as if you were saying they. So they completes the assignment is obviously not correct. They complete the assignment. So the student and her partner complete the assignment is the correct version. Another challenge is subjects connected by or. In this case, you ignore everything before the last noun. So in other words, the noun that's closest to the verb determines whether the verb is singular or plural. So this can be a little bit confusing because you can have a mixture of plural and singular nouns, but only one verb. And again, that verb should apply to the last noun that's listed. So in this example, the data suggests that either hailstones or wind have eroded the landform. That actually sounds fine to me when I say it out loud, but reading it, you can see that it's incorrect because the verb has goes with the word wind, not have. And so this is where it can be tricky to read your own work and to correct it. Even reading it out loud, it sounds kind of correct. So you have to be very specific about how you look for these verbs and matching them up to the nouns when you're correcting technical writing. There is a long list of pronouns, most of which follow very regular patterns. So anything with both or many will become plural, and you can see all the words here that become singular. Another, anybody, anyone, anything, all of these take the singular verb. Now, there are a few listed at the bottom that are context dependent. All, any, more, most, none, or some. And I'll get to those on the following slide. But for now, if you can remember that both and many are plural, most of these are singular, you can correct most sentences. So which scientist will test the pH? both, especially the chemist, has to test the pH. Well, in this case, both is plural. Both have to test the pH. And again, leaving out that little bit about especially the chemist makes it a little bit easier to mark this. Collective nouns depend on whether the noun acts collectively or individually. So these can go either way depending on how that noun is acting. And this is where it can become very challenging because you have to really understand what is going on in the sentence. It's context specific. So the field crew are waiting at the rock formation. That is incorrect, actually. The field crew here is acting as a collective unit. They're all waiting together. So the field crew is waiting at the rock formation is correct. Conversely, the field crew is each tasked with a specific job. In this case, each field crew member is an individual person being referred to collectively as the field crew, even though each is doing something individually. So in this case, the correct construction is the field crew are each tasked with a specific job. That one's a little bit tricky. You have to really think about what's going on within each sentence. And again, the reason it's so tricky is if you're just speaking out loud or if somebody is speaking to you and they use the wrong construction in this type of sentence, most people wouldn't catch it. Amounts are always singular, anything with a quantity. It doesn't matter how it sounds out loud or what you're talking about. If it's an amount, it is singular. So 300 milliliters of acid were added to the mixture. That actually sounds okay to my ears, even though the correct version is 300 milliliters of acid was added to the mixture. It doesn't matter how much, whether it's a fraction or some number greater than 1, it's always going to be singular. 5 centimeters of tape were used to seal the sample container. Again, it sounds like it should be were because we're saying 5 centimeters. However, the correct construction is 5 centimeters of tape was used to seal the sample container because all quantities take on a singular verb. Now, a related topic is mixed construction. In this case, we're not just messing up the number or plurality or the person, first person, second person, third person. Now we're actually mixing the subject and the object in the sentence and making it ambiguous. There are a lot of examples like this, and in the reading that I've left links to, you'll see several more examples, but I'll just leave one here. Having overflowed, the scientist mopped up the solution. We see sentences like this all the time. So what overflowed? If you just read this, it's probably intuitive to you that it is the solution that overflowed, but the sentence is just not written correctly because it leaves it as ambiguous. Was it the scientist that overflowed or the solution that overflowed? The best way to fix these sentences is to completely rewrite the sentence and just make it explicit what is the subject and the predicate. Because the solution overflowed, the scientist mopped it up. Here, the pronoun it clearly refers to the solution. And the first part of the sentence is very clear that it is the solution that overflowed. Again, go to the links I've left and you'll see several more examples of this type of construction.